Good morning, welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering current events on your Thursday morning Rise and Shine. And as we do this current events this morning here, we're looking at the topic U.S. withdrawal, drawing from UN Human Rights Council, referring to it as a cesspool. So this is what we'll be looking at here this morning here, the withdrawal of the United States from the UN Human Rights Council, referring to it as a cesspool. So welcome again to our live talk program. Hopefully you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on this day that the Lord has given you. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, we thank you again for the blessings of your word. We thank you for the blessings, dear Lord, of the Spirit that lead us into all truth. May you bless us, dear Lord, as we observe the current events that are happening around us. And may we take heed and be warned. Thank you again for your word. Thank you for your Spirit. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. So, U.S. withdrawing from UN Human Rights Council and refer to it as a cesspool. So, I have 3 articles to share with you and some thoughts about why this is so important and why this is a development that is, in more ways than one, not surprising, but it is the development that we're seeing and been ongoing. In Proverbs chapter 14, verse 34, it says simply that righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Any nation that want to build and be great again is necessary for that nation or to maintain greatness or to maintain a level of success. Whether it be a nation or individual, it's important for one to realize that righteousness is what exalts a person. Sin is a reproach. Sin causes, and ultimately sin causes death. And so, as we know, the prophecy predict what will happen in the end. We are here to promote the peaceful continuance of the nation, because righteousness is what the nation need, not more barbarism and siding with bullies. And so this article, I'm going to share my first article with you here off the bat. And before I go into the rest, I'll say much more. And this article is taken from Christian Post and is written by Stoyan Zainmoff. And it is entitled U.S. withdrawing from UN Human Rights Council, referring to it as a cesspool. Christian Watchdog warns of consequences. The United States government has announced through Nikki Haley, its ambassador to the United Nations, that it is withdrawing from the latter's Human Rights Council body, calling it a cesspool of bias that fails to advocate for human rights. Christian Solidarity Worldwide, a persecuted watchdog group, has warned that the move will not advance the battle against religious persecution around the world. However, human rights abusers continue to serve on and be elected to the council, Haley said Tuesday, as reported by CNN. So just kind of a quick note here. The article going to summarize it, but I'm sure you heard that Nikki Haley had requested, I think she's from South Carolina or North Carolina, somewhere down there, but she had requested or said that the United States is pulling out of the Human Rights Council. So here, the watchdog groups that are Christian watchdog groups for human rights abuses are saying they don't think this is a good idea. Continue reading the article here. The world's most inhumane regimes continue to escape its scrutiny, and the council continue to politicize scapegoat of countries with positive human rights record in an attempt to distract from the abusers in its ranks. For too long, and this is Haley, I'm reading statement here, for too long, she added, the Human Rights Council has been a protector of human rights abusers and a cesspool of political bias. End of quote. Vice President Mike Pence suggested on Tuesday in a tweet that a big part in the decision was the Council's bias against Israel and favoritism towards Palestinian protesters in Gaza. So I'll just pause again. So Vice President Pence tweeted that the reason why America had to pull out from the Human Rights Council was the UN Human Rights Group continuously basically side with the Palestinian protesters and against Israel. Continue reading here. While pro-Palestinian politicians have blamed Israel for the death of civilians, the United States and Israel have said that militant groups Hamas is sparking the protest and driving civilians into dangerous situation. Today, the U.S. took a stand, back to Haley again, or to Pence now. Today, the U.S. took a stand against some of the world's worst human rights violators by withdrawing from the United Nations Human Rights Council, Pence wrote. By elevating and protecting human rights violator and engaging in smear campaign against democratic nations, the UN Human Rights Council makes a mockery of itself, its members, and the mission it was founded on. For years, the UN Human Rights, or UNHRC for abbreviation, has engaged in ever more violent anti-American, anti-Israel invective, and the days of U.S. participation are over. End of quote from President Mike Pence. Stefan Dujarric, the spokesman for UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, said that the 47-member state body is disappointed at the move. The Secretary General would have much preferred for the United States to remain in the Human Rights Council, the statement expressed. The UN human rights architecture plays a very important role in the promotion and protection of human rights worldwide, it added. CSW, United Nations officer Claire Denman, also spoke out against the decision. CSW regrets the United States' decision to withdraw its member from the UNHRC. The HRC is the UN's foremost human rights body, which address some of the world's worst human rights violations and play a key role in maintaining accountability among states. While the system is not perfect, it remains the key forum in which to challenge human rights record globally, Denman said. The watchdog group said that the withdrawal will neither prompt nor advance effort to address the HRC's anomalies, but it is likely to strengthen the hands of recalcitrant state. Still, other experts such as Brett D. Schaefer and J. Kilhan, fellow in the International Rights Affair at the Heritage Foundation, Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom, defends the announcement. Schaefer wrote in an op-ed for Fox News that the council is deeply flawed, inconsistent, heavily biased against Israel, and plagued by a membership list that includes some of the world's worst human rights violators and dictators. Quote, from the beginning, the Human Rights Council exhibited blatant bias against Israel, including human rights abusers among its members, and was unable to confront serious human rights abuses in powerful or influential states. The very same flaws that discredited its predecessor, the UN Human Rights Commission, he argues. So this is what's going on there. So I'm sure you heard it on the news that the U.S. has withdrawn from the UN Human Rights Council, which is a 47-member group that takes up, that deals with human rights violation from country to country. They receive, requests, and then they investigate, and then they make a pronouncement against violators. And as the article has pointed out, that this is significant because United States, as withdrawn because they say that too much of the council's condemnation comes against America and Israel. And as you've been following the news, you probably noticed that recently, because of the movement of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, this has caused protests by, or the Palestinian protested, and in their protests, many of them were murdered or killed by the military, in saying that they basically were throwing rocks at the building or something, and then they shot them, killed them. So there is continued condemnation for this type of activity that America and Israel does in the Middle East. And so because of that, they decided to pull out of the Human Rights Council because they were being hit hard. So what I wanted to do here now with you, to expand the conversation, is I'm going to read for you the op-ed piece that was written by Schaefer, the person that was just referred to in this article, and he wrote it over by Fox News. And just to get from another point of view, what is the take, if I guess the conservative religious take, on why was it important for America to pull out of the Human Rights Council, and get it kind of from the horse's mouth kind of thing. Because we already heard from Haley, we heard from Vice President Trump. Now let's hear it from one of the pundits that are over there writing for Fox News, to get an idea of what is it that's going on, why America think it is bad to be in the Human Rights Council. So this is here taken from foxnews.com and is written by Brett D. Schaefer, and it's entitled U.S. Withdrawal from the United Nations Human Rights Council is the Right Decision. Here it reads, it says, the Trump administration announced Tuesday that the U.S. is leaving the notorious United Nations Human Rights Council has been characterized as an example of administration deep-seated hostility to the international community. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, the U.S. seemed to be the only government that seriously worked to get the UN Human Rights Council to promote universal respect and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms in a fair and equal manner. The 12-year-old council is deeply flawed, inconsistent, heavily biased against Israel, and plagued by a membership list that includes some of the world's worst human rights violators and dictators. None of these facts are in dispute. Over the past year, the U.S. has tried again and again to make the Human Rights Council work. Now, I paused there in the article because, again, for the sake of time, I limit how much material I pull in. But what it is, last year, Nikki Haley, the ambassador to the United States, the ambassador to the UN for the United States, she went to the United Nations Human Rights Council and gave a list of demands and protest and say if they don't clean up their act, she's gonna withdraw United States. So that's what he just referred to. So continue reading. It says, led by the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, and strongly supported by U.S. diplomats in Geneva, New York, Washington, and around the world, America has engaged bilaterally and multilaterally to promote reforms to address the anti-Israel bias, membership quality, and other reforms to streamline the work and improve the efficiency of the Human Rights Council. These American efforts have been met with disinterest and hostility. Even European governments and human rights groups have opposed U.S. reform out of fear that the countries hostile to human rights would seize the opportunity to weaken the Human Rights Council further, if that was even possible. All right? Continue reading here. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy that condemns the Human Rights Council to its gravely disappointing, biased, and efficient status quo. Worse, as long as this fear exists, any future reform effort will be stillborn. From the beginning, the Human Rights Council exhibited blatant bias against Israel, including human rights abuses among its members, and was unable to confront serious human rights abuses in powerful and influential state, the very same flaw that discredited its predecessor, the Human Rights Commission. George W. Bush administration refused to join the Human Rights Council in 2006, but despite the council record, Obama administration joined, arguing that the U.S. could improve the council by working from within. The administration, admittedly, there was a reduction in the ratio of Human Rights Council resolution focused on Israel after 2009. But did this make a difference for Israel? New countries were condemned, but the annual ritual of Israel condemnation continued unabated. So the council continued doing that. According to the watchdog group UN Watch, as at the end of last month, the Human Rights Council have adopted 80 condemnation resolution against Israel out of 169 overall against countries deemed human rights abusers, 47% of the total. So I just want to make sure that it's very clear to you. So what this gentleman here is saying is that out of the 169 resolution of condemnatory resolution, 80 was levied against Israel, 47% of the total condemnations that the Human Rights Council put out. So this is why America is in a tizzy with this. The Human Rights Council has been convened 28 special sessions devoted to human rights and other abuses, with 8, which is a 29%, focus on Israel. Next was Syria, the focus of 5 special session. Then came Burma with 2. So basically Israel topped the list according to Human Rights Council, according to this article, above Syria, which is war-torn right now, and Burma, which is persecuting the Rohingyas. That Israel should be the focus of nearly half of the Human Rights Council condemnatory resolution is absurd. That the Council spend exponential more time on Israel than on North Korea or Syria only underscore how its agenda has fallen victim to politicization and bias. Indeed, alone among the world's countries, Israel is subject to a separate human rights item known as Agenda Item 7, titled Human Rights Situation in Palestine and Other Occupied Arab Territories. Even other countries is examined under Item 4, Human Rights Situation, that requires the Council's attention. So Israel is particularly viewed as special. In addition, non-Israel condemnation tends toward low-hanging fruits. A wide-lauded Human Rights Council resolution established a commission to inquire inquiry for North Korea, passed without a vote in 2013. Likewise, Syria has few friends willing to vote for it in the Human Rights Council these days. These resolutions are welcome, but the presence of U.S. is not necessary for adoption. So basically, they just go with anything against Syria because it is a bad group of people, I guess. By contrast, Human Rights Council is notably unable to condemn human rights violation in powerful or influential countries like China, Cuba, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Zimbabwe. I don't know how Zimbabwe got in there. Despite respectively terrible records of religious persecution, punishment of political dissent, hostility of freedom of the press, any unequal rights for women, and use of force against civil society and government opponents. So this is what's going on. In fact, China and Cuba are among the 14 current members of the Human Rights Council rank not free by Freedom House. Unfortunately, most governments either prefer a weak, biased Human Rights Council or are willing to undertake the effort necessary to reform it. This is not a recent development in response to the Trump administration. The Obama administration met similar resistance when it proposed reform at a mandatory 2011 review of the Council. The Trump administration was right to question why the U.S. should expend so much time, effort, and influence in trying to make UN Human Rights Council resolution and act slightly less harmful and biased, oftentimes unsuccessfully, when the other member states are unwilling to invest similar time and effort in actually improving the councils itself. Leaving Human Rights Council does not mean the U.S. abandon its support for human rights. The U.S. could focus its effort on passing stronger resolution in a committee of the UN General Assembly that annually condemns a handful of states and adopts resolution on other human rights issues. Ambassador Haley has called for the U.S. to use its foreign assistance to support priorities at the United Nations. Promoting human rights resolution could be amongst them. Indeed, the U.S. could more prominently support human rights in its overall foreign aid program. According to the Congressional Research Service, America allocates 4 times as much assistance to environmental issues as it issues involvement the rule of law, and so forth. Likewise, U.S. could expand engagement and support for international body of organization of security and cooperation in Europe and in institutions like the National Endowment of Democracy, the International Republican Institution, the National Democratic Institution that monitor election and promote human rights. These dismissing the decision to withdraw the Human Rights Council as an example of Trump administration rejection of multilateral engagement missed the target. 2 more paragraphs. The Trump administration recognized rightly that staying in the Human Rights Council would at best ensure continued bias, selectively disappointment. Worse, it would implicitly endorse these outcomes. Those condemning U.S. for leaving should instead target their ire at the governments that refuse to support U.S. effort to fix the UN Human Rights Council manifest flaw that, like UN Commission and human rights before it, casts an ugly shadow on the reputation of the United Nations. End of article there. I'll finish out that article because I wanted to make sure I read all the comments that Schaefer here was putting forward. Very important to hear why they left the council. So this is what happened. I'm going to come back to Schaefer's article. But before this, I'm going to give an example of why I could understand why many Americans would want to pull out of the Human Rights Council. And I'm going to go back and analyze some of what he said in light of current events and history. So here's one current event. This is a quick hit article, short article here, just to expand your thinking before I start making much comments. And it's entitled, this is from Associated Press, and it's entitled UN Human Rights Chief, U.S. Policy on Migrant Children Unconscionable. Right? So you see the problem there? The title, I'm going to give you the title again. The UN Human Rights Chief says the U.S. policy on migrant children is unconscionable. So there goes the problem, because now, what I'm going to read in this article, the UN chief guy from Jordan, he's saying that what America is doing is wrong. So imagine if you are America as a nation, as one big body, or you're an individual American. And in some areas I was reading, they were basically pointing at Jordan and said Jordan is a violator. So imagine American looking and saying, how dare somebody from Jordan talk about we're doing bad? You see, that's where the problem comes in. So let's read this there short. The UN Human Rights Chief is urging the Trump administration to end new policies separating migrant children from their parents after entering the U.S. from Mexico, saying they're affected nearly 2,000 kids in the last 6 weeks. So Zaid Rahad Al Hussein say it's unconscionable that any country would seek to deter parents from migrating by inflicting such abuse on children. End of quote. He spoke at Monday's opening at the regular Human Rights Council session, his last before his term ends in August. Zayed, Jordanian prince, also decried concerns about countries including Syria, Myanmar, Hungary, Nicaragua, Israel, North Korea, India, Pakistan control part of Kashmir. He denounced the lack of access provided by UN member state to rights investigators, noting China has accumulated 15 pending requests in the last 5 years. End of article. So right there goes the problem. Because here is Zaid, and here is a Jordanian. So imagine somebody who is a Jordanian who is sitting as a chief, and his term ends in August, but he sits as a chief, and he's now going to do his prognostication, or no, his rulership, leader, whatever opinion, and he's going to say, hey, these are the violators, these are what we hear coming in, these are the cries that we hear coming in. And he lists now America, basically, because he says what America is doing to the kids by separating them from their parents. But he's listing America with Syria, Myanmar, Hungary, Nicaragua, which is one of the Central American states that people are fleeing from, Israel, which is doing all kind of murders to the Palestinians, North Korea, India, Pakistan. Part of that is controlled by Kashmir. And you throw America in there, you can see if Nikki Haley, imagine if Nikki Haley was there and he was saying this and was talking about, and then China, he also says 15 pending requests came in from China, but China is not allowing the UN investigators to go in and investigate the claims of abuses by the Chinese government. So imagine now you're having a discussion, and imagine any American that you work with, and you say to them that America is in the list with Nicaragua and Israel and North Korea and India and China and Myanmar, who is abusing the Rohingyas, and the war-torn, bloody Syria. Americans be like, what are you talking about? Get out of that council. How dare they talk like that about us? But that's the reality. Because what we just saw demonstrated on the south of the border was just barbaric. But yet they're saying, oh no, the Human Rights Council has no right to exist, because how dare they condemn us and they condemn Israel. Israel just killed, as was interestingly described online. So an article where they say Israel policy is an eye for eyelash. So basically, the attitude is somebody throw a rock at you, you shoot them. And so these people were protesting, throwing rocks from far away, and they just opened fire and killed 60 something, I think, of them, 60 something of the Palestinian. And many people were saying, wow, this is like an eye for eyelash. Somebody pull out the eyelash, and I'm sure you pull out eyelashes all the time when they go dead. And somebody pull out one of your eyelash, you decide to poke their eye out. Just overreaction. So then the Human Rights Council comes in and say, what Israel just done is wrong. America say, how dare you? We back in Israel. You're wrong. So remember, if you've been listening to me now, I've been talking about this idea of the American Declaration of Independence, and how the idea here that these are rights, especially for those of us who believe in God. These are rights that are inalienable rights given to us by our Creator. And the rights that we have in our Constitution, because some people talk about the United Nations rights, that body doesn't to me, it doesn't exist per se. And the reason why is because America exists. This is what it is. Even the UN is in New York City. It's America that would give the rights to a council like UN. And America is the one that really set the trend. If America basically say UN doesn't exist, it doesn't exist, because UN can enforce laws against the United States. That's my point there. In order for you to make a law, you have to enforce the law. UN can say all kind of stuff, as a body. But if America violates the law, they can enforce it against America. All they can do is put resolution of condemnation, and those resolution can't go forward because America is have one of the veto rights against any resolution. So this is really what's happening here. If another country does something that is bad, America can basically push to have a condemnation. But if America does something bad, who's going to condemn America? Who's going to stop America? That's just the problem where you have all power. You're not gonna somebody's not gonna tell you, oh, stop what you're doing. And that's where they're saying, oh, there's a problem with the UN human rights group, because nobody can enforce anything against America. Nobody can come in and stop America. How are you gonna stop somebody that is armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons? So when they say the Human Rights Council is wrong, it's wrong because Human Rights Council is condemning actions that is really being done by America. It's not really been even done by Israel. It's America that's doing these things in Israel against Palestine, because the Jews wouldn't have the power to do it without America. So think about this. If any Human Rights Council group was in existence back in the time of slavery, would America fall under condemnation? And the answer would be yes. Think about this also. In the time of Jim Crow law, when America, although they had a constitution, was hanging all these black men that were accused, and now it has come out because people have even confessed, women has confessed that these men never did anything to them, never even tried to talk to them. But these women, many of them, some of it I guess was true, a lot of it was a lie, were accusing these black men of things and then having them lynched. Or some white man will see a black person doing well in business and decide, I'm going to kill him and lynch him and say he did something to my wife or whatever. Now, just imagine all those cases going on. If the Human Rights Council was in existence then, would it have condemned America for having on its borders abuse of a group? Now, I want to point that out. A group of people. Not individual criminality, but a group of people. And you say yes. And the fact of the matter goes on and on and on, that there's things that were happening and are happening that would make it a problem. Also, when you think about this, the lead up to the war in Iraq that America did, where it sent Colin Powell into the United Nations to lie about weapons of mass destruction and stuff like that, and then override the UN when the UN says no war, America says we're going to war. Could the UN stop America? No, because the Bible doesn't predict about any UN. Where in the Bible you have ever seen a statement that intimates anything about UN? The closest you get to that is somewhere in Revelation 17, where it talks about, they're going to give their power to America, basically, and the Pope to basically ruin the world. But there's no other statement in the Bible that intimates about no world body. In any way, what it talks about is the US in the end, and what we see here, the power and the might belong to the United States. So if you remember the lead up to the war, Colin Powell went into the UN, and Colin Powell came up with vials and all kind of lies, and then say, we're going to go in. And they went in. When they went in, all the abuses that were done by American servicemen who pledge allegiance to the Constitution in a professional way, not just in a general way, say I'm a citizen, but these are people who represented the United States and the United States flag. But they went in, and we knew about Abu Ghraib, we knew about Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, and the abuses that goes on there. But if you go and ask an American and say, is it part of our legal system and our Constitution and civil rights and rights that there should be no unusual and punishment of people, of criminals, of people that are held in the justice system? And every American would say, yeah, that's part of our law. So if you ask, are those law human rights, or are those law God-given rights? They say they are God-given right. Should those laws be extended to criminals that are not on the soil of America, but are under control or on the control of Americans and on land that is controlled by America? They'll say yes. So I say, how about the people in Guantanamo Bay? They'll say, well, no, they're terrorists, so they can be tortured all day. So all of a sudden the laws become evaporated. So just imagine again the situation with Human Rights Council. The Human Rights Council saying we will have to make a resolution condemning the torture that is going on by America, that is being done by Americans across the world. America say your group is not legitimate because you're condemning us, and you're using our constitution to condemn our action. And we, as the head, because America is the most powerful nation on the earth, has a right to go against our constitution and torture people whenever we want to, even though we believe that's not only a human right, but it's a God-given right. So this is what's happening, and this is important to note. So when I'm going to go back now to Schaeffer article, and when you keep that in mind, and I also want to read it again for your thinking when I go back to this article. It says here, we hold these truths to be self-evident. This is the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That means self-evident, as I say, is something that is obvious. That all men are created equal and that are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So all men. So to deny a person any of these rights, there would have to be good reasons. In other words, to lock somebody in prison, it'd have to be them demonstrating that they can't be given, or those rights have to be removed from them. Or to take a person's life, you'd have to demonstrate that person intention is to murder people, so forth and so on. So here it is. So because of this little statement, we have this thing called the Constitution, in my mind at least. And from that, we came up with all kind of things. Right to a speedy trial, no cruel and unjust, unusual punishment to people. So notice recently why I say this grabbing of little kids and separating them from their parents was barbaric, because these are people who are working for America that swear to our Constitution. But although they swear to the Constitution that they should have no unusual and cruel punishment, they came to the conclusion that the punishment to a parent who tried to illegally cross into the border or illegally enter into America, they said the punishment is to pull away a child from the parent. And that will punish the parent so severely that the other parents that are trying to think about coming will see that punishment and it will deter them. So here you have people who swear to the Constitution. Now, these are not just the regular citizens, because I can understand the regular citizens who is not their profession. They have thought about this well. But these are people who say, I swear to uphold the Constitution. There are many people who live in America here that never swore to the Constitution because they're born here. They never say, I will uphold this thing. It's just by default, they're American. But these people swear to the Constitution that they will uphold the Constitution. But yet they came up with this idea, and they say it's the president that came up with it, that he who is the number one upholder, are supposed to be protector or, recognizer of these unalienable rights that came from God, decide that what could be the worst punishment. And he says, I know what, we're going to pull these kids away from the parents because that will get them scared as ever. And that will mess up these kids. And he says, let's do it. This is cruel and unusual punishment. And he did it. Now, here's the thing about what I say about the UN and the United States. Who is going to stop the United States from doing it? Who is going to stop the president from doing it? Nobody. You can't stop him because he has ultimate power and he has the most power in the world. The only person that really could stop him is the American people in mass or God himself. But other than that, you could protest all you want. The UN could say, oh, let's do another resolution. America is doing like what happened here, where the Jordanian guy came out and said, it is barbaric. He say it's inflicting such abuse on children, and he look at it as unconscionable. That means the person who did this did have no conscience. Well, think about it. A large percent of the U.S. population think that was a great idea. Yeah, and that we need to be tough on them. And tough on them is to give them a punishment that would make me recoil. That's basically what it is. You think about it and say, what would mess my head up, and mess my day up, and mess my year up, or if somebody just barge into my house, grab my kids, pull out my kids, and drive away. And I can't do nothing about it because they were sent by the United States president and he has nuclear weapons. And this is what basically happened. So when you think about that, when the US withdraw from Human Rights Council, there is nothing surprising here, because the person that is supposed to be the protector of these unalienable rights, not human rights, but God-given rights, who pledged to be the protector of these things, are actually doing it. Let's review some of what now the Schaefer gentleman said here. Now it says, these, going back to the second article I read, these American efforts have been met with disinterest and hostility. So he said they have tried to make effort to fix this. And one of the major things that Human Rights Council is doing is condemning Israel. Notice he says here that evil European governments, plural, and human rights groups, plural, has opposed the U.S. reform effort out of fear that countries hostile to the human rights would seize the opportunity to weaken the Human Rights Council further. So he's saying that the reason why Europe and human rights group have been disinterested and hostile about fixing the problem, and then he gives the reason. He's saying because they fear it would weaken the council more. Think about that, right? And when you think about that and think about how fascinating that story is, that European countries are disinterested and hostile towards any reform of the Human Rights Council. What does that tell you? Right? Human rights groups, these are groups that are, many of them, American-based groups. Because the first article I read was from Christian Post. The Christian Post is saying many Christian human rights groups believe this is a bad deal. So Christians, even in America, are thinking what the American government just did is a bad thing. This will create more problem, not less. And why they're doing this? Because the Human Rights Council has condemned Israel and it's condemned America for things that he has done. Now, another important thing there. So I want you to mark that, because it's not just basically brown countries are not interested in the American reforms that it's talking about, which is to stop condemning Israel. Now, here's another important point from the article. George W. Bush administration refused to join the Human Rights Council in 2006. Now, when you think about that, because 2006, the war in Iraq had gone full speed. The insurgents were hitting America back. I think by then they were talking about, so many hits per day and stuff like that. So George W. Bush here now had said he would not join it. Now, what do you think about the timing? Why he would not refuse to join the Human Rights Council? Because at the time, all we were talking about in the media on the left and the right was, should we be torturing people in Guantanamo Bay? The Abu Ghraib scandal either came already or passed, or it was in the future or past. I can't remember exactly. You can look and find the time period. So these black sites, I think they call it, where they would have the CIA, which is primarily Mormons. We have the CIA would be taking people to places like, I think it was Tunisia and Libya and I think Thailand or some of these other countries, and would torture them. So basically how it would work, say I'm here and say some Mormons or some Southern Baptist person don't like what I'm doing and they're working for the CIA. They will drive up to my house with one of these black, Benz van, the transit van. I guess if they're going to take me away in one of the nice ones. And they will come grab me and then basically fly me out on a private jet, but they'll go and torture me, say somewhere like Libya, who is a human rights violator. You see the problem there? They will go to a country that's a violator, because remember they're saying, America is saying, Nikki Haley is saying, why they're not condemning Cuba? But where were we torturing people in all these human rights violator countries? This is why if America goes and America turns back on its constitution, God has to step in. Because the countries People always say, well, what's really going on? What's going on is that the countries that they're saying, oh yeah, we should condemn because the human rights violator, is where the CIA go to torture people. So if America now on its soil opens up and says we're going to overturn the Constitution and we're going to make it that not only we don't torture people in places like Libya and Tunisia and Egypt and Cuba, we want to torture them in America, then that's where the problem. That's where now the cry of the righteous would have to go up and God would have to step in, because you can't stop the juggernaut. Because again, notice, nobody could stop, no congressperson, no senator could have stopped President Trump from torturing these families. It didn't matter what anybody say, unless the president says stop it, these kids were going to be tortured and their parents are going to be tortured. That's significant, and that's when you know, when it gets to that point, the only solution to the problem is God will have to step in. Because notice here, George Bush didn't join because under George Bush, the policy was torture. Even though that was against the American Constitution, and he was put in office and swear to uphold the American Constitution. But he and the people he's working for, the people all the way down to the torturer, the regular American soldier, all Americans all swear to the Constitution, says yes, cruel and unusual, unjust punishment. They would say the terrorists are animals, so we need to become animals worse than them to be able to give it to them. And that's what the whole idea is. They're animals, but I'm not supposed to turn an animal. So when you keep that in mind, so he says George Bush refused. That refusal is not a statement that's supporting his article. That's actually a very important point to go against his article and his Schaefer's conclusion here. Because again, under George Bush time, why would he join the UN Human Rights Council? Under that time, America was against its own constitution. America was saying, we don't believe in that. We don't believe that we shouldn't torture people. Speedy right to a trial. Remember, there's people still in Guantanamo Bay. So one of the civil rights that we have is that you shouldn't be held indefinite in prison. That was something that is against the American the rights. It's against basically the Declaration of Independence. We're going back to the British way of doing business and the Catholic way of doing business, where you lock people up in dungeon with false accusation. This is how they murdered Christ. False accusation, locked him up, arrested him, and then killed him on no evidence, just on a lot of falsehood. Now you have so many people still in Guantanamo Bay, and they could be terrorists or they could not be. But remember the rules, the Patriot Act that has been re-signed by Obama, re-signed by, I don't know if Trump has re-signed yet, because I don't know if it come up back for discussion. But the Patriot Act, what does it say? That if you are accused of any type of terroristic act or any type of act against the state of the United States, you can be arrested and tried without ever seeing the evidence against you or your lawyer seeing the evidence against you. Also, you can be tortured by Americans who swear to uphold the Constitution, and you can be held indefinite, which is against the Constitution, because the Constitution say that you should have a right to a speedy trial. You shouldn't be sitting for how long now? This is going on, how long are we talking about now? This is like over 17 years, I could be wrong, 16 years. Just sitting in prison, nobody know if you're guilty, nobody know the evidence, and you're just locked up in a Caribbean island, being tortured by Americans. And then these same Americans, after they've tortured you for years, they come back to America and they kill themselves because you created monsters. You're just saying, oh, you be the torturer. And then like, why am I torturing? Is there evidence against him? We don't know, but we catch him, and somebody said he was a criminal. Again, why this is significant for me? Because think about all the black men that are still being released, and some whites, but primarily black men that are being released from prison on death row, put there by corrupt district attorneys. So you can tell that this type of behavior normally net innocent people. And so that's why the problem with the constitutional writers, they say, the founding fathers say, hey, look, we can't do this, because if we do this, we could be murdering innocent people. And we know that we have murdered so many innocent people through the judicial system in the United States. But yet we says we're not going to join the UN Council because it might condemn us and Israel for murdering Palestinians. Notice here, new countries were condemned. Again, another point from the article. New countries were condemned, but the annual ritual of Israel condemnation continued unabated. So they're saying basically Israel continued to get a yearly condemnation. Every year you just say, okay, here we go now, time to condemn Israel. Now, think about this now. All right. As it said, China is an abuser. North Korea is an abuser. North Korea is being lifted up to high heaven right now by the current administration. Cuba is an abuser because Cuba takes away civil rights and so forth. But Israel there is on the condemnation. Now, let me ask you this. Just casually thinking, and then I don't know if we're going to do deep thinking here. Which country comes up in the news and they have coverage for abuses more than any other country? Is it North Korea? Is it China? Is it Russia? Is it Syria? Which country comes up and has been coming up for years on the radar for abuses? Because North Korea, for the most part, you can't even get information out of it. China has a very controlled state media, so to speak. But Israel somehow, there's always a lot of coverage about what's going on. And the only thing that I remember in my mind, just casually thinking, just browsing my head, because I have to read sometime over these Fox News and stuff to get what they're thinking. The only other country that comes up on the radar in the past was South Africa. And many people have viewed this as a similar setup. So I'm not surprised that every year there is a condemnation for Israel and its behavior, because the policy of Israel and its behavior is one group of people against another. That to me is the similar idea, like let's say Pakistan and the Myanmar area. Is one group of people subjugating another. You know, like if stuff happening in South Korea, North Korea, China, Cuba, it's political groups against other, and it's a system that is in place, blah blah. But here you have it is the subjugation, is a constant bulldozing, is a constant shooting, is a constant stuff that goes on in Israel. And so my observation just on perusing the news and stuff like that, I see Israel constantly come up as violators because they're pushing out, they're tearing down the house, they're taking over property. And this is how I see it. And this is constantly documented and clearly demonstrated that there is one group oppressing another group. Any other information I would like to see. Another quick 2 points here from the article of Schaefer pointing out his thing primarily. It says a widely lauded Human Rights Council resolution established a commission to inquiry for North Korea passed without a vote in 2013. Likewise, Syria has few friends willing to vote for it in the Human Rights Council these days. So he's saying basically a resolution comes up and inquiring into North Korea, and they pass. Because it's like everybody accept the fact North Korea is what it is. Right? Everybody accept the fact Syria is what it is. It's just more like it's a cesspool. What's going on there is just debauchery. It's just one group of people killing another group of people, and it's just never ending bloodshed. Israel, on the other hand, I can see where the problem is, because Israel comes with, I think, more deeper emotions. Because at the end of the day, it's Israel oppressing the Palestinians, but America is backing them. And that's why I think America is upset about this, because the resolutions against Israel, it's focused on Israel, seem to bring the ire of America, because America is backing it. So that's my understanding. And, we've covered here why I think this is a mistake. All right, so notice here now, I'm going to take that last point from him and see if I can bring in a little here else. It says, by contrast, Human Rights Council is notably unable to condemn human rights violation in powerful or influential countries like China, Cuba, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Zimbabwe. So irks again. Now notice he say that they don't condemn, whether it be religious, political persecution, or hostility to freedom of the press or equal rights of human and use of force against civil society and government opponents in these countries. So let's look at the list again real quickly. China. Who is China's number one trading partner? My understanding is that's America. Cuba obviously is on a communism, and America for years have always condemned Cuban regime and stuff like that. Russia, again, powerful nation, but again, Russia was always on a condemnation. Remember the story what happened with Crimea? Embargoes were filed against Crimea by Obama administration and so forth. Russia again for Crimea. Saudi Arabia again is backed by America. And so if he's saying they did not condemn Saudi Arabia for human rights violation, well, America is the number one backer for Saudi Arabia in the Western world. Now, Zimbabwe is the point that is interesting to me. Because if you remember the story with Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe was an interesting anomaly. If you're in the West, Zimbabwe and its leaders need to be condemned. If you're probably outside of the Western world, like you don't have a dog in the fight, like from where I'm from originally. Zimbabwe poses, to me, a more of a dilemma. Because if you remember the story with Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe president, I think Mugabe, I think he passed away, or is not out of power. I think they took him out of power. Zimbabwe came up with this idea, President Mugabe, he came up with this idea that since the lands in Zimbabwe was stolen from the native peoples, he needs some payback to the farmers and the farmers to give up the land. And he forced the farmers to give up the land. Now, some people in the West thought, and Europe and America thought that was barbaric and cruel and robbery. He didn't think it was, and he took over, took away the land, and then America and other countries did embargo. So why this is so tricky? Because if you're in the West and you're a Westerner, one will look at it as theft because it's their land, they own it. If you're neutral, then you're like, well, I can see, as I say, both sides. There's many sides, because they kind of own it because they've been there for a while and they basically kill people to own it, so they kind of fought for it. That's how ownership often comes about in life, wars of conquest. But I could see from the Zimbabwean side, they say, well, yeah, they kind of didn't really own it, they stole it. And since we have the power, we're going to do to them what they did to us. We're going to take it back. It was originally us, it's back to us now. And that's the Zimbabwe thing. So you could see the dilemma if you're not a Westerner and you were sitting on a council to vote. You'd be like, well, look, how did they get it in the first place? They get it by murdering people. How did they lose it? Well, they were just told to leave. What you want me to do? You want me to vote for the farmers or against the Zimbabwe government? Either way. I'm like, man, why do I need to vote? It's like it's neutral. You stole it and you got run off the land. What's the point? You got it for free. Enjoy your benefit. And what it is that the European nations were supposed to pay back these farmers. They decided not to pay back these farmers. So these farmers lost the land. Some people believe, I've heard even religious people, Adventists, say that it was theft. I'm not one to think that, because I'm saying it is more difficult than that. Because as I say, if you use force to take, like in Native America here, if you use force to take away the land from a Native America and they use force to kick you back off the land and take the land, well, really, what really happened? Nothing happened, because it's just, tit for tat. So look at these situations. If you look at these situations, you can see why now America will come out and say, since you're condemning Israel so much, we don't like it, because to condemn Israel, you're condemning us also. And we back Israel for everything they're doing, the Palestinian nation, because of our religious people in America, the conservatives in America. Hence, we're offended. And so what they did, they pulled out the Human Rights Council. I believe they're doing that is not a surprise, because I believe the direction where America is going, many of the things that they will be doing under the religious control of the conservatives and the evangelicals and so forth will not make them probably ever be able to rejoin the council, because many of their actions, like what they did to the kids and their parents down south, is going to be increasing. And so there's going to be more condemnation for unconscionable behavior. So this is what we believe will be happening, and so no surprises here. Let's pray. We thank you, Lord, again for your word. We thank you for your guidance. We thank you, dear Father, for lead us into paths of truth and revealing to us, dear Lord, even the things that are going on, that we might know, dear Lord, that as we see this thing develop, that we know sooner or later the persecution will come our way. I pray that we may be faithful to the end. Thank you for your spirit, we pray for Christ's sake. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow morning again live by God's grace. We will talk about wisdom for living. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.